And we are back. The Kraken are back, and most importantly, the captain is back. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken come back from the lengthy 2-week Four Nations break, bookending the break with wins, starting off with that overtime win against the Flames, and now coming into Florida for the first half of a back-to-back after the break, and getting a win against the Panthers. Which, real quick as a side note, with the break, while it was a long one for the Four Nations tournament, and I really wasn't expecting a lot going into that tournament, it was absolutely fantastic. If you didn't watch any of it, you definitely missed out, especially the gold medal game, but really throughout it, it was some fantastic hockey, unlike with the All-Star game that is usually in that spot. It was clear that at least the vast majority of the players definitely cared, and yeah, some of that, especially on the Canadian side of things, might have been a little bit egged on by some outside of hockey events, but either way, it was fantastic, and it felt like mid-season playoff hockey, just sometimes with players on the same team on opposite teams. Like, for example, the team the Kraken were playing in this game in the Florida Panthers, who had 8 players across, I think, all 4 teams of the Four Nations tournament, and had at least one pretty notable player in Matthew Tkachuk not play this first game back from it against the Kraken. So the Kraken getting the Panthers at the right time, and for the Panthers, maybe not ideal that Tkachuk got injured during the tournament and didn't even finish the last gold medal game. He was on the bench for the entirety of it, but midway through the second period, didn't have another shift the rest of the game, so hopefully for their sake he gets back before too much longer, though they'll make the playoffs either way, and I'm sure will make a deep playoff run. Meanwhile, on the Kraken end of things, as we know, Kaapo Kakko was the only Kraken player in the tournament, and the Kraken were set to be one of the 2 teams without a player in the tournament until that trade that brought Kakko to Seattle. He had played for Team Finland, played pretty well, at least when he was allowed to play anyway, as he was a scratch for the Finnish team in the first game against the US, but then played so well for them in the second game against Sweden, where he did have an assist, and it looked like he had a goal, but it turns out it went off his teammate behind him stick and into the net instead, so either way still picks up 1 point, and with his performance in that game, got moved up to start the third game against Team Canada on the first line. A game that didn't go particularly well for the Finnish team, but still a good tournament for Kakko, and most importantly for the Kraken, he didn't get hurt and was available to play in this game against the Panthers, which does make a difference early on in the game. As we get into it with the only changes in the Kraken lineup from, well, a while back, but 2 changes with 2 players coming back into the lineup. Decord still in net. I mean, at least this time he's had 2 weeks off, so he's gotten some rest in. But as for the 2 changes, they're both players coming back from injury, as Riker Evans comes back on the defensive end, taking the spot of Cale Fleury, playing, I think, pretty much the entire game with Mahura, so not a ton of ice time, but at least easing him back in from his injury. And it's a similar case with a guy who missed 40 games for the Kraken with an injury and a surgery. The captain, Jordan Eberle, finally back out on the ice for the Kraken. He does slot into the wing on the 4th line in this game, but I don't think that'll last particularly long. He looked very good in this game. It's just, for the Kraken, a chance, especially with the back-to-back, to ease him into it a little bit, make sure he's back up to NHL speed, and specifically his body is holding up to that NHL action after the rehab that he's been going through following that surgery a few months ago. And like I said, he looked fantastic in this game, really from the jump. It looked like the Eberle from the start of the season, who got off to a pretty hot start. He had 11 points in the first 17 games for the Kraken before that injury. And he comes back and seems to pick up right where he left off. He doesn't get on the score sheet in this game, though he did have a couple of pretty good plays that easily could have ended up in the back of the net. He had one of those signature Jordan Eberle spinorama 720, 360 backhand shots that Bobrovsky was able to save. And by the end of it, even though I think they went into the game probably looking to ease him in and just kind of feel it out as the game went along, he ends up with over 14 minutes of ice time. So we'll see if they kind of keep him down on that 4th line just for one more game, because they are coming back on that back-to-back, playing tomorrow in Tampa Bay. But I don't expect it to last very long. Before much longer, we'll see him up on the 2nd line alongside probably Shane Wright, but maybe they'll put him on the Stevenson line. I don't know. We'll see where they put him up, but he'll be outside that 4th line pretty quickly here. Meanwhile, as for the rest of the team, they don't necessarily get off to the best start right away. They send the Panthers almost immediately to a power play, which does get a couple of good chances on net. One in particular that Decord has to come up with a pretty good save on. A pass from right next to him up into the low slot. An immediate shot on net, but Decord reads it perfectly and is in place to make the save. Aside from that, the Kraken do a pretty good job of killing that one off, and then not too much longer after that, they end up on a power play of their own, which, granted, for the majority of the season, and certainly going in the break, has not necessarily been something that Kraken fans have looked forward to, as the Kraken power play has been largely anemic, but this, I don't know whether it was the time they had to practice during the break or just the break itself that had them energized coming back, and this is one of the best power plays that we've seen all season long. It helps that they do end up scoring on it, but throughout the entire 2 minutes of it, as they do score towards the end of the 2 minutes, they got a number of good chances on net. The first unit nearly scores on a couple of occasions, and it's a couple nice saves from Bobrovsky that keep them off the board. So the Panthers survive the first wave and finally get one clear down to the other end, but as the Kraken make their change, get the second unit out on the ice, they're quickly into the offensive end themselves, which has been a problem throughout the season for the Kraken, transitioning across the blue line into the offensive end, much less making anything happen once they get there, but they're quickly into the offensive end. And then two fantastic keeps at the blue line by Vince Dunn allow this play to happen. The first one in particular, I don't even know how he kept this one in. It's a puck that is flung out mid-air, and Dunn, standing on the blue line as he's exiting the zone to chase after it, just kind of backhand throws his stick at it and hits it out of mid-air right above the blue line, keeping it in. And obviously, if it had been offside, they would have challenged it, and this goal would have never counted, but he keeps it in there. The Panthers eventually try and clear it up along the boards one more time, but Dunn keeps it in on the corner, gets it down to Shane Wright, who from kind of the mid-face-off circle along the boards just flings it out into the high slot for Matty Beniers. Beniers has a look and does look shot for just a second, long enough to freeze the lone defenseman right in front of him and leave Kaapo Kakko wide open on the far side, who he quickly passes to. Kakko, with all the time and space he needs, skates right up to the net and just shoves it home through the pads, well, actually under the pads, through the 5-hole and into the back of the net to give the Kraken the power play goal and early 1-0 lead. So who knows if the break was better and the vacation that most of the players had, or maybe playing that extra hockey that Kakko did while they were all on the beach or the golf course or wherever they were, helped him stay fresh and gets him that first goal back from the break. And also with this goal, Kakko's 10th of the season, his 6th with the Kraken. As far as the side quest, or really kind of now more the main quest for the Kraken, now that the playoffs are pretty much out of reach, that being the progress and growth of the younger players, well, you got pretty much all that you could want as far as scoring from your younger players, with the secondary assist being Shane Wright, primary assist being Matty Beniers, and Kaapo Kakko obviously the goal. So your three young talented forwards that, especially if they keep Kakko around, are the core of your forward group going forward into the long-term future. Well, there they are on the power play, making it happen. Anyway, from there, with the only two power plays of the game already out of the way, the rest of the first period is pretty back and forth, some good chances both ways. Decord a couple more good saves, Bobrovsky a couple good saves at the other end, a couple of those being the ones on Eberle that I already talked about, one of those being the spinning backhanded shot that he had. McCann had a good shot that was also taken away by Bobrovsky, but we end up getting to that first intermission with the Kraken still holding a 1-0 lead, which, as we all know, is not something we've been particularly accustomed to over the course of the season with the Kraken, having overall a pretty good first period, especially against a team the caliber of the defending champions in the Florida Panthers. Of course, as we get into the second period, this is a little bit more of the Kraken we've been used to over the course of the season. The second period is kind of just the Kraken holding on for dear life and trying to survive, Decord having to do a lot of work in net, as the Panthers spend the majority of this period, at least with possession of the puck, moving towards the Kraken net, if not spending a lot of it in the Kraken offensive end, or the Panthers offensive end, the Kraken end of the ice, with Decord making the saves. Though with all that being said, to be fair, it wasn't necessarily a terrible second period from the Kraken either, at least not relative to their average second period over the course of the season, which is a pretty low bar. They did spend a lot of time in their own end of the ice, but they played pretty well there. Decord really only had to make one or two grade A saves. The Kraken defensively not having the giant breakdowns that we have seen a little too frequently, especially in second periods over the course of the season, whether that's in transition with the benches being farther away, or just forgetting about guys on the backside of plays in their end of the ice. That really didn't happen very much in the second period at all. But the one time that it did, it cost them. As the one time the Panthers do end up getting on the board in this game, at least the one time that it counts anyway, it is a Panthers player, really two, getting in past the Kraken defense. It's the pairing of Alexiak and Montour that are both just a step to step and a half too slow for their parts of this play. Alexiak is just a step too slow to get up in front of this pass and block off Lindell's pass out to the front of the net, where Montour is at least a step, if not a step and a half, behind Luosterainen, who gets in past him to the high crease with his stick on the ice. The pass finds his tape and goes right into the top far corner past Decord. Really no chance for Decord with that nice pass and redirect into the net to tie the game for the Panthers. And from there, the Panthers would continue to press for more, getting one more very good chance pretty much right away after they tie the game. That one saved by Decord. Eventually, though, they would get a second one into the net past him off of, again, a bit of a defensive miscue. The Kraken failing to get it out across the blue line. A turnover at the blue line leads to a 3-on-2 that pretty quickly turns to a 2-on-1. A pass up into the slot for a wide open shot gets through Decord and into the net past him to give the Panthers the 2-1 lead. Wait, not so fast, as Decord right away was already protesting that his blocker arm had been interfered with as the puck was going into the net, and sure enough, the Kraken, after taking a look at it, challenged for goaltender interference, with the call on the ice being a good goal. I gotta say, though, I wasn't feeling particularly confident in this one getting overturned, especially with the call on the ice being a good goal. There's maybe a little, there certainly is contact after the puck gets passed. I took this screenshot from the overhead on the replay. The puck is right between Decord and I think it's Rodriguez for the Panthers here. And I don't really see a ton of contact. So by the time they really do hit each other, the puck has already passed Decord and into the net. With that being said, though, Rodriguez is fully in the crease and is preventing Decord from pushing clean over to that side where he would have to be to make that save. And considering he did have time while he was pushed into the crease, he had plenty of time to try and get out of it and really didn't make any effort to get out of the crease. So even though if I had to bet on it, especially given the track record with the Kraken and goaltender interference challenges, whether it's them or the other team making the challenge, I probably would have bet against this one getting overturned. You can still see where the argument is to have this challenge, and I don't really hate it from the Kraken, even if it is kind of a 50-50 whether or not it gets overturned. It is a big momentum shift, the Panthers scoring twice in 5 minutes to take the lead from the Kraken. And even at that, your penalty kill was pretty good in the previous one, so if you do have to go to another kill, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's, I think, a chance worth taking, and it ends up paying off for them as they come back, saying that action by Rodriguez of not leaving the crease when he had the chance and then being there to make that contact with Decord was enough to overturn it. It's goaltender interference. It comes off the board, and the Kraken dodge a big bullet that, to be perfectly honest, they kind of set themselves up for with that defensive breakdown and turnover at the blue line. And as an added bonus for the Kraken with the successful challenge, it also seemed to kill whatever momentum the Panthers had had going for pretty much the entirety of the second period for the last few minutes of it, as really nothing particularly of note happens in the last few minutes of the second period, which was definitely an improvement from the Kraken perspective over how the first 16 or so minutes had gone. So, well, once again, as we've kind of gotten used to over the course of the season with the Kraken, the second period was far from ideal, with them playing mostly on their heels and giving up the lead, at least not giving the lead to the other team, as we are now going into the third period with a tie 1-1 game, a third period that has gone particularly well for the Kraken over the course of the season, with them coming into this game still the fourth best team in the NHL in the third period by goal differential, which really just points to how bad they've been in the first and second period that we are where we are in the standings with how good the Kraken have been in these third periods, making all these comebacks and at least making games exciting, even if they haven't won near enough of them. But as far as this game is concerned, considering you're going into the third tied, all it takes is a average third period from the Kraken and they'll come out on the right end of this, and that's just what ends up happening. As the Kraken get off to a pretty good start, it is answered by the Panthers. Overall, I'd say it was a pretty back and forth, well-played third period. I don't know that I'd necessarily give an edge even to one team or the other. Over the course of it, I think the Panthers might end up with a few more shots on net, but that's largely because they do have the empty net extra skater towards the end of the game. And that's because midway through the third period, the Kraken end up taking the lead off of a great play from the Shane Wright line, just as we kind of get to the end of the Panthers having that bounce back response to the good start from the third to the Kraken. Back the other way, it's Shane Wright with the puck in transition, and he really makes this play happen with how he sets it up in transition across the blue line. As he comes down the ice with the puck through the neutral zone, veers as he crosses center ice towards the Florida bench along the boards there before cutting back the other way across the blue line, across to the far side of the ice, the face of the play taking both Florida defensemen with him, which opens up that far side of the ice along the boards by the bench for Jared McCann to cross behind him, get out into some open ice, and then Wright finishes it by taking the defenseman all the way out to the far side before spinning a pass to Larson entering behind him. Larson then a 2-on-1 setup, gets it across to McCann, who buries the shot to give the Kraken the 2-1 lead. For McCann, it has been a bit of a struggle getting the puck into the back of the net. He had a couple of good chances earlier in this game. One good shot in the first period that was denied, and then a wraparound chance that, if he had gotten it around the post, would have gone in, but he ends up putting it off the outside of the post, which, to be fair in the grand scheme of things, as far as the puck luck of the game is concerned, the Panthers earlier on in the second period also had a similar case of a wraparound that would have gone in had it gotten around the post, but it also went off the post and stayed out. So both teams catching a bit of a break there in the second. Either way, this time, McCann makes no mistake. He buries it past Bobrovsky, who barely has any chance on this one. The great setup by Wright to open up that side of the ice for McCann to skate into. McCann getting into it, and Larson getting that pass across to him to give the Kraken the 2-1 lead. So for McCann, it's his 15th of the season, which hopefully will start to break him out a little bit, and we'll start to see a little bit more of that McCann goal production that we're used to, assuming he doesn't get moved at or before the deadline, which I'll still have that video on what to expect from the Kraken going into the deadline coming up here shortly. I was going to have it in this last week after we got back from our vacation, but then with the travel, everyone got sick and then got everyone sick again. It's been a week, but either way, that video will be coming. Hopefully McCann doesn't move, is my personal opinion on that, for a little bit of a spoiler, but he gets his 15th of the season. Larson gets his 11th assist, and Wright gets his 21st assist on the season, his second of the game, and his 12th point in the last 11 games. Also now his third multi-point game in the last 4. And as we all know, point streaks can come and go. Scoring, especially for certain players, can come in bursts and then disappear. We've seen that this season with McCann, and there's other aspects to the game that don't show up on a point sheet that are just as important. We've seen that with Beniers over the last season and a half now. But I think it's safe to say that, at least for right now, Wright has definitely found his stride in the NHL, and his scoring, really ever since he had those few games being scratched back in late November, has looked like a different player and has been producing for the Kraken pretty well in whatever role that he's been out there on. And all this is happening with him playing just over 13 minutes per game, so just imagine what he could do with more NHL experience and getting more up towards the 18, 19, 20 minutes per game that we've even seen Beniers get to a few times this season. But you know what, real quick on that, I think there might be a couple of different reasons as to why Wright isn't seeing the ice time of a Matty Beniers, or maybe more Chandler Stevenson, who generally I think he's played better than this season, at least defensively, certainly so far. And part of it is just that this is effectively his rookie season, so there's probably some amount of just trying to shelter him and make sure that he is getting caught up and not getting overused. Especially, the NHL season is already a pretty grueling one with the 82 games, but this season in particular, with this big break that we just had, kind of condensing things on either side of them, lots of back-to-backs and stuff like that. At the same time, we didn't really see the Kraken ever shelter Matty Beniers. He, in his rookie season where he won the Calder, was averaging over 17 minutes of ice time a night. Last season, he was close to 18, and now he is getting closer to 19 this season. At the same time, though, with Beniers, it never really seemed like the NHL game was too fast for him. Really, from the jump, he was able to keep up with the NHL game, whether that was offensively or defensively. Maybe at times, especially last season, it seemed a little bit too big or more physical for him. We have seen him have issues of getting pushed off the puck, again, especially last season. He'd get pushed off the puck, whether it was an open ice, or he's especially not the best on the forecheck. He can win puck battles along the boards, but he's not going to lay any big hits or anything like that. And yeah, like I said, we've seen him get pushed off the puck quite a bit. Unlike with Wright, who early on, especially in that first season and the few games we saw him there, and even the first couple of games last season, it really just seemed like the game was too fast for him. He was overthinking things, and that might have even been a bit of what we saw early on in the season, where he just wasn't really able to always keep up with what was going on, and that's what led to a couple of those scratches. He was just getting too much in his head, overthinking things too much, and allowing the game to outpace him. Now it seems like he's caught up, so maybe eventually that ice time will start to get more and more as these games go along. Another aspect for why he and Stevenson, we might see that 6 minutes difference of ice time a night, is that Stevenson is the guy that they're going to send out when they need to win a faceoff. He's just flat out, by a wide margin, the best at winning faceoffs on the team. Beniers is a couple percentage points higher than Wright, and Wright has had the worst still, I mean, he's starting to go up, but he's still south of 47% in the faceoff dot, so he's not going to get nearly as many of those defensive zone faceoffs where the Kraken really don't want to lose them, as they do end up in the back of the net from time to time. Now, with all that being said, I still personally would like to see Wright getting a little bit more ice time, especially as we get into the back half, the last quarter of the season. That isn't going to matter whether the Kraken win or lose, and in fact, if they end up losing, that might be a better thing. Though that being said, the way Wright is playing right now, giving him more ice time might not actually help you lose games. You might end up winning a little bit more. But either way, I think there is value for the Kraken in these last 20 or so games of the season of giving Wright a little bit of a heavier load and just seeing how he handles it. If it seems like it's affecting him negatively, then you can step it back a little bit again. But this is a guy that you see long term as your first line center or second line center, a guy that's going to be playing more of those 20-minute nights that we are already seeing Beniers playing. And especially with how he's scoring lately, it seems like he might be ready to at least start getting a little bit closer to that than the 13 to 14 minutes that he's been getting a night here over this last majority of the season. Anyway, that whole tangent aside, getting back to the game, the Kraken pretty much just closed this one out the rest of the way. The Panthers really don't get any more particularly grade A chances. Eventually, with just over 3 minutes left, they pull Bobrovsky. The Kraken have a couple long shot chances at the empty net from deep in there, and neither one really even gets particularly close. The Panthers really don't get that close to scoring with the extra man out on the ice, so the Kraken close it out to get the 2-1 victory and get their second win in a row, bookending that break with the 2 wins. And maybe we'll even see them get their first win on the season on the second half of a back-to-back in Tampa Bay, though honestly it would be a bit surprising if they went into Florida and Tampa Bay and came out with 2 wins. Honestly, I'd just take them actually showing up for the second half of a back-to-back for once, which is not something they've done a ton this season, regardless of whether they win or lose. Just make it a fun game to watch. Something that this first half of the back-to-back certainly was, as the Kraken come away with that 2-1 win, a good win against a good team, even if they were missing probably their best player in Matthew Tkachuk. Either way, the Kraken on the season come away with 3 of 4 possible points against the defending champs. A Florida Panthers team that has been good the entire history of the Kraken, and for whatever reason, the Kraken played pretty well against this team, and it shows again here. Unfortunately, the other team in Florida, who they play tomorrow, has not necessarily had the same experience. That's a team the Kraken have had some struggles against, so we'll see how that game goes. But until then, I think we've pretty much exhausted what there is to talk about in this game. Spent a good long time on how Wright is developing, the fantastic play that he's had here lately for the Kraken. Beniers as well. I mean, he's talked a lot about Wright, but Beniers in that top line continued to play well in this game. Created a lot of chances, especially in the first period. It seemed like almost every shift they were on the ice, they were getting a good chance on net. And that continued in the third period. Schwartz had a couple very good looks to give the Kraken the lead in the third, or even extend the lead once they had it. Wasn't able to find the back of the net, but Kakko and Beniers keep setting up Schwartz. Schwartz also just getting net front and causing traffic and chaos out there so that the two of them can get some better opportunities. That line definitely continues to earn the 20 or so minutes of ice time they get a night. And yeah, the trio of Wright, Beniers, and Kakko playing well and at least making you feel better about where things are headed, even if it isn't headed anywhere that we'd like it to this particular season. With that though, and mentioning one more time the good play from the returning captain in Jordan Eberle, I think we can close this one out with the Kraken 3 stars, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help decide the Kraken 3 stars after every game, or help in deciding the Kraken awards on the channel at the end of the season, you can help support a little bit more than you already are by watching to this point by going to the link down below and supporting on Patreon as well. With the first star, the first and second stars I feel like are pretty obvious. It's just a matter of who goes where, but I think it's hard to ignore Joey Daccord as the first star. Again, he kind of steals this one for the Kraken, just allows 1 shot in on 27 shots and at a pretty, well, at least a handful of pretty good saves in this game, bailing the Kraken out on a couple of occasions. The replay crew also bailing them out on one. With that, another 960 plus save percentage night for Daccord. The second star, like I said, also I think fairly obvious. It's got to be Shane Wright for me. The 2 assists on the night, and really was, I mean, they're both secondary assists, and secondary assists when it comes to advanced stats, the ones that even look at the difference between a primary or a secondary assist, often will rate secondary assists lower than a primary, which generally speaking I think makes some sense for obvious reasons. But as far as secondary assists are concerned, obviously they're not all created equal. And the one that Wright has on, especially that second goal, the game winner for McCann, I mean, that play that he makes in transition through the neutral zone and entering the offensive end is the only way that that goal happens in the first place. So even if he was the third to last guy to touch the puck before it goes into the net, I think he's probably more responsible for that goal than anybody else in the play. And just generally continuing to play very well on top of it. Another multi-point night for him, as we already talked about. And then with the third star, there's any number of other guys you could go with. Larson had a good night, had an assist on that goal as well. Dunn had a pretty good night. Beniers played well. Really, that entire first line did. We already talked about Eberle's good return. In the end, though, I think I'm going to go with Jared McCann. He does get the game-winning goal. He's gets the first official star basically because he gets the game-winning goal for whatever reason. Official stars tend to default to the guy that gets the game-winning goal even when it happens in the shootouts, so that's a thing that I don't typically think of that much. I don't really care when a player scores a goal. I guess overtime may be a little bit different, but either way, McCann had a fantastic game. He does get the game-winning goal, but had a number of other very good chances in this game, and just generally looked a lot more like the dangerous offensive threat McCann that we're used to, that we just haven't really seen that much of over the last couple of months or so. But of course, as always, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars would be, what you thought of this game, or just maybe what you did during the break, how you enjoyed the Four Nations tournament, and I will have a video about what the Kraken might do at the deadline. There was another video I was planning to do in this last week that didn't happen because of the variety of illnesses and other things that were going on here in this last week at our house, but it was one that probably didn't seem great with the success of the Four Nations tournament. I'll give the NHL their flowers. They did very well with that one. And we'll get to that other topic in time. But at least for now, if you haven't made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy the video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below to help support the channel, so I'd appreciate using them. Until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.